Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for a deep dive into something with major global impact?
Always up for a challenge. What are we diving into today?
Well, we're talking about the 44th and 45th ASEAN Summits.
ASEAN Summits. Those don't always grab the headlines, do they?
True, they can seem a bit under the radar, but trust me, these summits are a really big deal, even if they don't always make front page news.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. For those of us who need a little refresher, what exactly is ASEAN again?
Right, so ASEAN stands for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Basically, it's a political and economic union of 10 member states in Southeast Asia. Think of it as a major power player in the region.
Gotcha. And this year's summit, is it happening?
This year, it's in Vientiane, Laos, from October 8th to 11th.
Okay, and what's the theme this time around? What are they focusing on?
The theme is ASEAN, enhancing connectivity and resilience. Catchy, right?
Definitely gets the point across.
Yeah.
So what can we expect to see happen at this summit? Any inside info?
Well, from the sources we've been looking at, it sounds like it's going to be massive. We're talking over 20 meetings scheduled, thousands of delegates from the member states, plus all the dialogue partners.
Dialogue partners.
Yeah, so that includes countries like the U.S., China, Japan, Australia, India, you name it. Plus, you've got all the international media organizations like the UN. It's a huge gathering of really influential players.
Wow, that's a lot of people. Laos must be pulling out all the stops to get ready.
Oh, absolutely. I was reading that they're going all out with street decorations symbolizing unity, and the National Convention Center is getting prepped for the onslaught.
I bet. With that many people coming in, the logistics must be mind-boggling.
Yeah, they even mentioned special training for the traffic police in Vientiane to manage everything. Oh, and get this, they're temporarily closing 497 schools in the city just to ease the traffic flow.
Wow, they really aren't taking any chances. It really highlights how significant this ASEAN summit is. But, I'm sure some people listening might be thinking, oh, okay, that's interesting, but why should I care about a bunch of meetings happening halfway across the world?
That's a fair point. It's easy to feel disconnected from these sorts of events. But here's the thing, this isn't just some diplomatic get-together with fancy dinners and handshakes. This is about shaping the future.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more about why these summits actually matter.
Well, think of it this way. These ASEAN summits are where global agreements are made, the kind that have ripple effects that reach us all, whether we realize it or not.
So you're saying what happens at ASEAN doesn't stay in ASEAN?
Exactly. We could be talking about trade deals that might impact the prices of things you buy every day, or climate initiatives that affect the environment we all share. It's all connected.
Okay, now you're making me feel a bit more personally invested in all of this. Can you give me some concrete examples of what's on the agenda this year?
You bet. One of the big ones they'll be discussing is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership.
I've heard of that, RCEP, right?
Yep, RCEP. It's a massive free trade agreement, currently the world's largest, in fact, and it's about to get even more interesting.
How so? Is it expanding or something?
Exactly. We were just reading in the Bangkok Post that Hong Kong, Sri Lanka, and Chile have all applied to join RCEP.
Wow. So imagine the potential economic shift. That's huge. New markets opening up, possible job creation, maybe even changes on the cost of goods down the line because of it.
It's huge. When we talk about global impact, RCEP is a prime example of what can come out of these summits.
So it's not just about managing existing agreements. It's about looking ahead, planning for the future.
100%. Another thing they'll be discussing is the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. It's basically their roadmap for the next 2 decades. They're thinking long-term, which I find pretty impressive.
That's thinking ahead. What are some of the key things outlined in this Vision 2045?
It covers a lot, but a lot of it focuses on things like digital transformation, sustainable development, and of course, connectivity.
It's all connected, isn't it?
Exactly. And speaking of connections, another big topic on the agenda is the ASEAN Digital Economic Framework Agreement. Imagine a region-wide digital economy that's a game changer for Southeast Asia.
That would be huge. A game changer in what ways, specifically?
Well, think about it. It could completely revolutionize how business is done in the region, opening up incredible opportunities, streamlining trade, and connecting people in ways we haven't even thought of yet.
And we can't forget about the environment. Climate change is a global issue, and it's great to see ASEAN taking a proactive approach.
Absolutely. The ASEAN strategy for carbon neutrality is a key part of their plan. It's about attracting investment in green technologies and setting the stage for a more sustainable future for the region, which is something the Bangkok Post was really highlighting.
Rightfully so. It's a critical issue. So we've got the economic side of the summit, But I have a feeling things are never that straightforward, are they? There have to be some geopolitical complexities thrown into the mix as well, right?
You know it. It wouldn't be a true deep dive if we didn't address the elephant in the room. Or should I say the elephants?
Let's hear it. What are the major points of contention likely to cast a shadow over this summit?
Well, there are a couple of big ones. First, there's the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, which is a major concern for the entire region.
Right, the situation in Myanmar has been incredibly difficult for everyone involved.
It's a complex and sensitive issue, and ASEAN is trying to find a peaceful resolution while also providing humanitarian support.
I can only imagine how challenging that must be.
And then, of course, there are the ever-present tensions stemming from the Ukraine-Russia war.
It's been a major point of contention globally, so it's no surprise that it would impact the ASEAN Summit as well.
Exactly. Last year's East Asia Summit saw some real disagreements about the war, and it'll be interesting to see how things unfold this year. Will there be more of a united front, or will we see tensions flare up again?
It's like walking a tightrope, trying to balance regional stability with global concerns.
Absolutely. And speaking of balancing acts, there's another layer to this summit that we need to discuss.
Absolutely. The digital economy is a huge focus for ASEAN. They see it as a key driver of economic growth, job creation, and overall improvement in people's lives.
And this framework agreement, what's the main goal?
The goal is to establish a common digital market across all 10 member states. That means facilitating cross-border e-commerce, promoting digital inclusion, encouraging innovation, you name it.
It's like building a digital highway connecting all corners of ASEAN. This could really change the game, especially for businesses and entrepreneurs.
100%. It opens up so many opportunities. Businesses can expand their reach, tap into new markets, connect with customers across borders, and for consumers, greater access to goods and services, potentially at better prices.
It sounds like a win-win.
Potentially. Of course, there are challenges too. We have to think about data privacy, cybersecurity, making sure everyone has access to digital infrastructure. But the potential benefits are huge.
It always comes back to finding that balance, doesn't it? Harnessing the power of technology, but being mindful of the potential downsides.
Precisely. And it's not just about the economic benefits. The digital economy can also play a role in bridging that digital divide within ASEAN, empowering marginalized communities, promoting social inclusion.
Can you give me an example? How would that work?
Well, imagine how telemedicine could improve healthcare access in remote areas, or how online education platforms could give learning opportunities to people who don't have access to traditional education systems.
It's about using technology to make a real difference, to make things better for everyone.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a bit, we've talked a lot about ASEAN's goals, but we can't ignore the geopolitical challenges we touched on earlier. These issues are going to play a big part in how things unfold at the summit.
It's like a backdrop, right? A complex backdrop that adds another layer of tension to everything else that's going on. The situation in Myanmar, for example, that has to be weighing heavily on everyone's minds.
Absolutely. It's been over 2 years since the military coup, and the country is still incredibly unstable. Violence, human rights abuses, it's a dire situation.
And the international community has condemned the junta's actions. So where does ASEAN fit into all of this?
They're in a tough spot. ASEAN has been trying to find a peaceful resolution. They appointed a special envoy to try and facilitate some dialogue between the junta and the opposition.
Have there been any breakthroughs?
So far, progress has been limited.
It's a delicate situation. ASEAN is trying to uphold its principles of non-interference while also addressing a crisis that threatens the stability of the whole region.
It's a tightrope walk, for sure. And they've faced criticism for not taking a stronger stance against the junta.
But at the same time, they have to be careful not to push Myanmar further into isolation.
Exactly. It's a complex situation with no easy answers.
It's a tough spot, for sure. And it really highlights the complexities of regional diplomacy when you've got a crisis like this.
No doubt about it. And then you've got the ongoing tensions between the West and Russia, which, let's face it, cast a pretty big shadow over last year's summit. Finding some common ground on issues like the Ukraine conflict, that's going to be a challenge for ASEAN, especially with so many different perspectives within the bloc.
It's easy to forget that ASEAN isn't this perfectly unified group with one voice. They're a group of very different countries with their own histories, their own interests, their own alliances even.
Exactly. And that diversity, while it can be a strength in many ways, it can also make it tough to reach a consensus on these really sensitive geopolitical issues. Remember what the Bangkok Post said about last year's East Asia Summit?
You mean how they could barely agree on a joint statement?
Exactly. The U.S. and Russia were there, along with all the ASEAN members, and they were completely at odds over the wording related to the Ukraine conflict. It really highlights the divisions.
So how does a group like ASEAN, with its emphasis on consensus building and cooperation, navigate these increasingly fractured geopolitical fault lines?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a real balancing act. They have to engage all parties, promote dialogue, try to find common ground wherever possible, but at the same time, they've got to uphold their own core principles. And when issues directly threaten regional stability, they've got to be willing to stand firm. It's a tough line to walk.
It sounds like it. But, ASEAN has a history of navigating tricky situations like this. Whether they can continue to do so in an increasingly divided world, well, that remains to be seen. Speaking of pivotal moments, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about Malaysia taking over as ASEAN chair in 2025. What are your thoughts? What can we expect from them?
Well, that Bernama article we talked about earlier, they highlighted Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's emphasis on a couple of key things. Strengthening ASEAN centrality, for one, and unity. It suggests that Malaysia might prioritize boosting cooperation and coordination within the bloc itself.
So focusing on ASEAN's strengths, making sure they're a united front on the global stage.
Exactly. And Anwar has been pretty vocal about another thing. ASEAN taking more active role in tackling global issues, climate change, sustainable development. These are things he's really passionate about. So I think we can expect to see Malaysia pushing these causes, positioning ASEAN as a leader in these critical areas.
So it's not just about continuing what's already in motion. It sounds like Malaysia wants to set a new course for the future of ASEAN.
Exactly. Each ASEAN chair brings something new to the table. It'll be interesting to see how Malaysia uses their chairmanship to shape the agenda, to advance their own interests, but also to work towards those bigger collective goals of the bloc.
It's a delicate dance, isn't it? Balancing those national interests with the need for regional cooperation. It's a good reminder that behind all the acronyms and the policy discussions, there's a very real human element to all of this.
It's easy to forget about that sometimes. But the Bangkok Post mentioning those Thai citizens caught in the middle of the Israel-Hamas conflict, that really drove it home for me. These global events have very real consequences for real people.
It's a sobering thought. And it brings us full circle to the theme of this year's ASEAN Summit, enhancing connectivity and resilience. ASEAN is facing some unprecedented challenges, there's no doubt about it. Geopolitical tensions, climate change, economic uncertainties, the human cost of conflict. It's a lot to grapple with.
It really is.
Yeah.
And how they navigate these challenges, how they adapt and evolve, it's going to determine not just the future of Southeast Asia, but also its place in the world.
It's a pivotal moment, for sure. And for everyone listening, it's something to think about. What do you think this means for the future? For ASEAN, for Southeast Asia, for the world? The decisions made in those meetings, they're going to have ripple effects that extend far beyond the region itself. It's a lot to process, a lot to unpack. But that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating. Thanks for joining us on this one.
Till next time.